I'm all done with my sanding now. Just make sure you give the sandpaper a bit of a clean out because we've got to use it again in a couple of days for the next coat. So just make sure you do that. Now for the next coat we're going to use the green bag, and what I want you to do is measure out 4 kilos of product. So 4 kilos of the 20 kilos. We're going to mix the remaining 16 kilos with 4 litres of water, so you can get stuck in and do that, and you can set this 4 kilos aside. The reason we're doing it is that you'll find the product is quite runny, and we want it runny for over here, but when we're doing these tricky vertical bits here, it's quite hard to use. So we're going to use a different mix ratio for this. So we can get stuck in, do the dome first, and then we'll work on the front. Now we'll just add that with the sandpaper. I just tidied up between my arch bricks here. So anywhere I was a little bit high, good time to just fold it in half, sort of rub it in between there to clean them out. I've run my masking tape around, so that's given me a nice clean line to work to. I've put it about 5mm out this time, so we're going for a thinner coat over the whole oven. And I've obviously put this piece around the top here to keep that lip nice and neat as well. I'm all mixed up and ready to go. I've added my 4 litres to my 16 kilos of product. Now you're going to find this product is really sloppy, so it's really hard to pick up on the trowel and put across onto the oven without making a big mess. So what I'd recommend is just the shovel part from a shovel and broom. So it's going to be real easy to just scoop out and lay over. Just like that. And once we get it up there, you can see this one's sort of rolling down. You can see it's on the move there, which is why it's so tricky to use on the front. But we want it nice and slushy on the side. Just tilting my trowel back so I can just gently scrape that across and spread that around the oven. So I'm aiming for 5mm. You can just see how easily that is to work over, which is great. And once again we are going to level it off and make sure it's all nice and consistent with the Cambering 3000. So you can sort of just bang it and let it run down, but you don't want to create a big pool of mortar down here that you're trying to fix up. So just gently work your way around. You are going to get some splats, and because if you've never done plastering before, it is a little bit tricky. Just take your time. We've got plenty of time on this one. I'm going to try using it on the trowel, but see, I lost quite a bit there, so just a matter of being patient and working this material on. Once it's sort of in a 5mm bed, it's not going anywhere, so this isn't slumping down. There's no problems here. It's just a matter of getting the material on there, which is the biggest pain. So I'm going to crack into that. I'll go around the oven and then we'll do a bit of curving with the Cambering so I can show you the finish that you're after, and then we can mix our second lot, which is going to be used around the front here. So I'm going to crack into this for 5 minutes. Now I just want to show you again how we're sort of going to attempt to do these areas here. Well, not attempt, how we are going to do these areas here. So you can just run it up like that and just run the trowel up behind it to get the material onto that area. Hope you can see that alright, but I'm just sort of catching the material as it flows off this shovel so that I can push it up over here. Now one thing you'll notice is that the material will start to sort of dull off a little bit, and that's because the water from the mix has actually been sucked into the material behind. So we don't have a huge amount of time before we want to jump onto the Cambering, but if you're reasonably quick, we should be able to do the whole back area of the dome before we jump in and start curving it. So I've gone around and covered it. I have used up most of my material, but I've reserved a little bit for any hollows that I find when I'm using the Cambering. Now you'll see these lines here. I just went round and very gently, very little pressure at all, just went around the whole oven. Just gently sort of, you tilt that trowel back and then slowly slide it over, just so that we get a reasonably consistent result just from the trowel itself before we use the Cambering. And quite often you'll see a little hole that you want to fill in before we use this tool. What a mess. So just as well we've got this tool is the saviour, because as you can imagine, without it we're going to struggle to get much better result than that. That is hideous. So exactly the same as we've done in the other coats. put it right down the bottom, and then just wiggle our way up. Now this is such a beautiful sort of wet material, you'll find that this thing just flows over the top. And we're not going for perfection here, even though you can see I've got it there, not with that lump, but it's come up really well. So I'm just going to keep rolling this over. Until I get that real consistency. If I've got too much of a build up on it, I'm just going to clean it off. I don't want too much getting in my way. So that must have been just from a couple of high spots that I had there. So just put that in there, shape it like I want, and then roll it up there. So what we should be getting is a coat that is quite a bit better than the last coat we did. So we're slowly inching our way towards perfection, and the last coat we're not actually going to use this tool on, we're just going to use a sponged finish. So I don't know if you, hope you can see, but I've got a little bit of a hollow here, so I'm just going to chuck some mortar in there. Now I want to be careful around here because I want to maintain my nice shape, and I want to make sure it's even with the other side. Once I put that material on, I just gently, very gently, with the trowel flick it out, and then I can go back up here and get that beautiful curve that I'm after. So you can see what a difference this tool makes. Honestly, it just takes something that only a professional could do and makes it easy for anyone, even a person like me. Quite a few sort of hollows around the back here, so I'll get some material and I'll fill those in, and then I'll work around the other side just like I did that. But once it's like that, we leave it. That's it, we don't touch it. So any little high spots, any little ridges that you can see, we're just going to leave because we will sand them back. Something that's a little bit higher up around there, I might just touch up with the trowel or with the steel a bit later on when it started to sort of set just a little bit. But don't be worried about these little ridges and things here, they're fine. The last coat is going to take care of all that. So this is where we're at. I'm very happy with the way the domes come up. I've got a small ridge here, I'm just going to sand that back tomorrow. So I've just very lightly gone over the oven and sort of curved it off. Don't overwork it. If something's sitting a little bit high, don't worry about it. As you've seen, we can very easily sort of sand that back. So the main thing is we've got our curve going and we're nice and even on both sides of the oven. Looking really good. What I'm going to do is take off my masking tape. So I'm going to do that now so I can tidy up that edge with my little scraper. So I'm going to rip that tape off and then just gently, very gently tidy it up. I don't want to scrape any material off. I just want it to sit nicely against the oven there. So I'm going to jump in to do that. You can use a little bit of the sloppy stuff around here. That's probably not too important. It's more the firmer stuff we need for around the front face there. Just thought I'd give you a quick closer look at the standard that I'm happy with on this oven, just to save any confusion. So you'll see I've got sort of finished lines where the curvinator stopped, but my overall curve is there, and that's the most important thing. Things like these little hollows, they're only sort of 1/2 mil deep, so that's fine. The next coat can sort that out. But it just gives you an idea about what it'll look like when you've finished. Just thought I'd show you what's going on the front here. So I have built up my layer, and I'm most worried about getting it all nice and square. Now the idea when you're working this front bit is just to go really, really light with your trowel or your scraper. So just keep it really, really light. I've built up this area here, and then I can just very gently work my scraper up there, and you'll see how easily it comes up. I need a little bit more over there. I'll just very gently work that into place. Now if there's a bit of a ridge here, I can get rid of it, but I can't get rid of a hollow with sandpaper for obvious reasons, so I need to try and build that up. So this coat will be just as easy to sand as the last coat. You just work your way up, and like I say, very, very gentle strokes. Now, probably looks a little bit worse than it actually is in the camera, but I can actually put another blob across there, and I'm just very gently working it in. Not squishing it in real hard, just very gently working it across. So I've got a symmetrical shape going on here. Now I'm going to clean my trowel often, and if it starts to stick, I'll actually go and wash it, because the last thing you want is that. So I'm just going to keep working around here. Very difficult to multitask for a man. Right, so I've got a little hollow here. I can just fill it in. Just gently work it up. I can tell my trowel is actually pulling a little bit on the plaster. It gives you an idea of what we're doing. So just work all those imperfections out. If it's high, we can sand it back. If it's low, we are in trouble. So the next coat is just a decorative coat. It'll cover a lot of the floors, but we really need it to be as good as we can possibly get it with this coat. This is our last opportunity to do any shaping, so just make sure you're stepping back and having a look at the oven to make sure you are happy that it's nice and symmetrical. So remember the term rustic when you're working with pizza ovens. Might just need a little bit more up there, so I'll just blob it like that, work it down. If you go too thick, it will sag, so just be careful. You can't go too thick, but you can see I'm just gently rubbing the product. There's virtually no pressure from my trowel. And once you've got it, leave it. So don't touch it again. Don't try and get it absolutely perfect. Just make sure it is good enough. And we are looking superb. I'm just going to give it one more swipe there. Try and keep that definition of that line up. Just took a bit of a hit there, so I'll just whisk that off. Quite often you're looking to make sure that is at the same height as that. So that's an element of being nice and symmetrical there. And I am looking really good. So that's that coat, and we are done. So I am looking forward to putting the final coat on. Now I made a decision not to put any of this coat in here in these gaps, so I'm just going to use the final plaster coat to fill those in. I was getting a little bit far out. You can see this one's a little bit close to the surface, and to save any sanding tomorrow, I'm just going to take those off, but they can be sanded back and made to look tidy. But the last coat is going to tidy everything up. Just that, let me get that. Look at that. So I just want to cover off a quick note about this area here. It's really important that we have a camber away from the flue. So any water that hits this and hits the surface here actually runs down and off the oven. The last thing we want is it sitting and pooling against the flue. So to do that, when you're going round with your scraper or whatever you're using, just keep a bit of an angle on it. So that's an exaggerated angle, but that will allow you to have a small camber in the plaster there. So if I come straight out here, you'll see you can pick up on that slight camber. It doesn't need to be a lot, but it certainly doesn't want to be slanted inwards towards the flue. So just make sure you achieve that. Once you've let this cure for 24 hours, it's time to go and just knock off those little ridges with your sandpaper. So it's not a matter of really getting into it and sort of curving those shapes. We've already done that on the previous coat. It's just literally a matter of knocking those edges off as you go. So make your way around. The next coat is only going to be about 1 or 2 mils thick, so it's really, really thin, and we kind of roll it over the top of the surface. So it's important that this is as flat as possible. It will fix up minor deviations in the surface, but really we want it as tidy and as neat as we possibly can get. If you've got a keen eye, you've probably already seen that I've done a bit of plaster work over this area here. So I had a bit of plaster left over, and I was trying to imagine how I could make the oven look a little bit different and perhaps get a little bit more watertight. So I just put a piece of masking tape along here first, and then I ran some mortar along here. Now I actually cambered it down, so I put more here and cambered it down to the outside edge. So obviously any water that runs down the oven is just going to pour over. And I'm going to continue the coat that we put over the top of this down over right to the edge. And I can perhaps paint it a different colour or something like that, I don't know yet. I'll let my imagination run wild, and that's a really cool aspect of these ovens. So I'm going to get stuck in and just do my sanding, get that all prepared, and then we are ready for the next coat to go on. Now after this has been allowed to cure for 24 hours, it's now time for us to get in and just knock off these little edges. So there won't be nearly as much sanding as the previous coat, and we don't want to really lay into it. We just want to gently rub those areas until they're nice and flat. So just a light touch over the top to get rid of those bumps and to get it as smooth as possible. So the next layer is going to go on at about 1 or 2 mils. So it's really, really thin. So it's important that this is as sort of smooth as possible. So you really don't want to get too stuck into it. You just want to make sure you fix up those little ridges and do as little sanding as possible, but just so it's nice and tidy. I wasn't wearing a dust mask, I should have, so do as I say, know what I do, but it wasn't actually that dusty, but just in case there's stuff in here that I can't see, I should be wearing a dust mask, so naughty me. It also got very noisy, so I put on my earmuffs, so that's my ears telling me what to do. But so just work your way around, and to say don't take too much off. You don't need to get too stuck into it, just make it as nice and smooth as possible. Quite a fun process really, because just getting so excited about what we're doing here. This is going to be a really cool looking oven, so no doubt yours will be looking very similar. So I'm going to continue. So you just want to go over and give the oven a good sweeping, so get rid of as much of the dust as you possibly can. After you've cleaned up the majority of it, if you've got one of those flash blower things, really hit it hard and get rid of as much as you can. Otherwise, just give it a really good sweeping and make sure there's no loose dust sitting on it, because that can affect the ability for the next layer to adhere in there. So just be really pedantic about that, give it a real good clean. If you don't clean around here properly, your masking tape won't stick very well either, so it makes that job a bit more tricky. You'll see a couple of the arch bricks I have removed the masking tape from because I wasn't happy. It was sort of peeling away. I've caught it a couple of times as I was applying the plaster, so I've gone over and just sort of cleaned up these bricks to make sure they've remained nice and tidy, and I will go and remask those bits. So any bits like that, you can see, you can just sort of grind it out. You don't need to be firm. It's just a matter of wearing it down so there's enough room for that last layer of plaster to go on there.